The cake candles flickered in the dim kitchen as Mark Thompson sat alone, the silence of his 40th birthday broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock. What happened next would change everything, not just for him, but for his 3 identical daughters who had been planning in secret for weeks. If you've ever felt the weight of loss or witnessed the extraordinary resilience of children, this story will touch your heart. Like and subscribe to see more stories that remind us of the unexpected ways love finds us when we need it most. Daddy, close your eyes. Mark looked up from his untouched slice of store-bought cake to see his 8-year-old triplets, Lily, Emma, and Sophie, standing in the doorway, identical grins on their faces despite the sadness that had lingered in their eyes since their mother's passing 2 years ago. "Girls, I thought you were asleep," he said, quickly wiping away a tear he hoped they hadn't noticed. "We've been practicing," Sophie said, the most outspoken of the 3. "For weeks," added Emma, clutching something behind her back. Lily, always the quietest, approached him and whispered, "We need you to pretend you're Mom for just a minute." Mark felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mom always knew what to do on birthdays," Lily explained. "We want to do what she would have done, but we need your help." The girls exchanged glances before Emma continued, "We found Mom's old recipe book. The one with the chocolate cake you always said was better than anything in any bakery." Mark remembered that book. Caroline had kept it tucked away in the kitchen cabinet, filled with handwritten notes and food stains from years of use. He hadn't been able to look at it since she died. "We tried to make it ourselves," Sophie admitted, "but we couldn't reach everything, and we didn't know how to use the mixer right. So we need you to pretend to be Mom and help us," Lily finished. "Just for tonight." Mark felt something crack inside him, the protective shell he'd built around his grief. These 3 little girls, mirror images of each other with their mother's auburn hair and his green eyes, had been trying to recreate Caroline's birthday tradition for him. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "Please, Daddy," they said in unison, a trick they'd perfected since birth. Taking a deep breath, Mark nodded. "What do I need to do?" The girls led him to the kitchen counter where flour had been spilled, egg shells scattered, and chocolate smeared across the surface. Their failed attempt at baking sat in a mixing bowl, lumpy and uneven. "First," Sophie instructed, "you have to put on this." From behind her back, Emma produced their mother's old apron, the one with cherries printed across the front that Caroline had worn for every special occasion meal. Mark's hands trembled as he took it. The fabric still smelled faintly of her perfume. "Mom always sang while she baked," Lily reminded him. And so, with his daughter's eyes watching expectantly, Mark Thompson tied on his late wife's apron and began to sing her favorite Beatles song in a shaky voice while measuring flour into a clean bowl. For the next hour, the kitchen transformed. The triplets giggled as Mark exaggerated Caroline's mannerisms, the way she'd tap the spoon twice on the bowl's edge, her habit of dancing between the refrigerator and counter, how she'd dab flour on their noses for good luck. By midnight, a lopsided but perfectly chocolate cake sat cooling on the counter. The girls insisted on frosting it themselves, their small fingers creating swirls and patterns while Mark watched, his heart both breaking and healing simultaneously. "Mom would say we need candles," Emma declared. "And ice cream," added Sophie. "And a wish," Lily whispered. When the cake was complete, messy but made with more love than any bakery creation, they gathered around the table again. This time, all 4 of them sat together as Mark blew out fresh candles. "What did you wish for, Daddy?" Sophie asked. Mark looked at his daughters, these 3 miracles who had somehow found a way to bring joy back into his life when he thought it impossible. "I can't tell you," he said, following birthday tradition. "But I can tell you what I'm thankful for." The girls leaned in, their identical faces serious. "I'm thankful for you 3. For reminding me that your mom is still here," he touched his heart, "and here." He gestured around the kitchen, now messy with their collective baking efforts. Lily, always the most perceptive, climbed onto his lap. "Mom would be proud of us, wouldn't she?" "So proud," Mark assured her, his voice thick. Of all of us. That night marked a turning point for the Thompson family. What had begun as a lonely birthday celebration had transformed into something healing. The triplets' innocent request, "Pretend you're our mom," had given Mark permission to incorporate Caroline's memory into their lives in a way that celebrated rather than mourned her. In the months that followed, Mark found himself reaching for Caroline's recipe book more often. Sunday mornings became pancake days, just as they had been when she was alive. The girls took turns wearing their mother's apron, now adjusted with safety pins to fit their small frames. They began to talk about Caroline openly, not just the sad fact of her absence, but the joy of who she had been. Mark shared stories he'd almost forgotten, how their mother had danced in the rain, her terrible puns that made everyone groan, the way she could find four-leaf clovers when no one else could. The triplets, though identical in appearance, processed their grief differently. Sophie channeled her mother's energy, becoming the household organizer with lists and schedules. Emma discovered Caroline's old gardening tools and began nurturing the backyard flower beds that had gone untended. Lily, the quietest, started keeping a journal like her mother had, filling it with observations and questions about the world. Mark faced his own challenges. Dating seemed impossible, both logistically with 3 young daughters and emotionally with his heart still tied to Caroline. Work pressures mounted as he tried to balance his career as an architect with being present for every school event and doctor's appointment. The triplets' third-grade teacher called him in for a conference 6 months after that birthday night. "Mr. Thompson," Ms. Winters said gently, "I've noticed the girls sometimes speak about their mother as if she's still alive." Mark nodded, understanding her concern. "They're not confused about reality," he explained. "They've just found a way to keep her present in their lives. We all have." Ms. Winters seemed unconvinced. "Children need to process grief appropriately. I'm worried they're stuck in denial." That evening, Mark sat the girls down for a family meeting, something Caroline had always insisted upon for important discussions. "Ms. Winters is worried about how we talk about Mom," he explained carefully. The triplets exchanged their secret glance, the one that had always made Caroline laugh and say they were telepathically plotting. "We know Mom is dead," Sophie stated matter-of-factly. "But that doesn't mean she has to be gone," Emma added. Lily, who had been drawing in her journal, looked up. "We're not pretending she's still alive. We're just remembering her out loud." Mark felt a surge of pride at their wisdom. "That's exactly right. And we're going to keep doing that, no matter what anyone thinks." The following week, he sent Ms. Winters a book about healthy grief processing in children, along with a note thanking her for her concern but assuring her that their family therapist approved of their approach. As the seasons changed, so did the Thompson household. Mark learned to French braid hair, after many failed attempts that the girls documented with giggly photographs. He figured out the complicated social politics of third-grade birthday parties. He discovered that he could, in fact, sew costume pieces the night before school plays. The triplets, meanwhile, grew more independent. They created a rotating chore system without being asked. They learned to make simple meals when Mark had late work calls. They formed a protective unit at school, standing up for each other when classmates made insensitive comments about their family situation. On difficult days, Caroline's birthday, their wedding anniversary, the day she died, they established new traditions. Instead of avoiding the pain, they faced it together. They would visit Caroline's favorite park, each bringing something to share. Mark would bring a poem he'd found that reminded him of her, Sophie would organize a picnic with all of Caroline's favorite foods, Emma would bring wildflowers she'd grown, and Lily would read a page from her journal about memories or questions she wished she could ask her mother. A year after that pivotal birthday, Mark found himself facing another challenge. His mother-in-law, Eleanor, who had been distant since Caroline's death, suddenly wanted more involvement in the girls' lives. "They need a feminine influence," she insisted during an unexpected visit. "They need someone to teach them things only a mother can." Mark felt the familiar defensiveness rise. "They have me," he said firmly. And they have Caroline's memory. Eleanor's expression softened unexpectedly. I know. And you're doing remarkably well, Mark. Better than I expected. She hesitated. Caroline would be proud of you. It was the first time she had offered any approval since her daughter's death. I miss her too, Mark admitted. Every day. That conversation opened a new chapter. Eleanor began visiting regularly, not to criticize but to share. She brought old photo albums the girls had never seen, told stories from Caroline's childhood, and taught them family recipes that had been passed down for generations. Mark watched as another piece of their healing fell into place. The girls needed these connections to their mother's history, parts of her he couldn't provide. By the time Mark's 41st birthday approached, the Thompson household had found a new rhythm. Not perfect, often chaotic, but fundamentally sound. The grief remained, but it no longer dominated their days. The night before his birthday, Mark overheard the triplets whispering in their bedroom. No, we can't do the same thing as last year, Sophie was saying. But it worked so well, Emma argued. That's why we need something new, Lily's soft voice explained. Dad doesn't need to pretend to be mom anymore. He's figured out how to be both for us. Mark leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by his daughter's insight. The next morning, he woke to the smell of slightly burnt toast and the sound of giggling. The girls had prepared breakfast in bed, complete with wobbly hand-drawn cards and a gift wrapped in Sunday comics. Happy birthday, Dad, they chorused as they crowded onto his bed. Inside the package was a framed photograph he'd never seen before. It showed Caroline holding the triplets as newborns, her face tired but radiant with joy. On the back, in her handwriting, was a note, for Mark, the 4 greatest loves of my life. We're the luckiest. Where did you find this? He asked, voice catching. Grandma Eleanor found it in Mom's things, Sophie explained. She said Mom had been saving it for a special occasion. Mark gathered his daughters close, these 3 miracles who had taught him that love doesn't end with loss, it transforms. Thank you, he whispered. We have one more surprise, Emma announced. The girls led him to the kitchen where a chocolate cake sat on the counter, not perfectly even, but recognizably made from Caroline's recipe. We practiced with Grandma Eleanor, Lily explained proudly. We didn't need you to pretend this time. Mark looked at the cake, then at his daughters' expectant faces. It's perfect, he said honestly. As they cut into the cake, which was slightly underbaked in the middle but delicious nonetheless, Mark reflected on the journey of the past year. From that moment when 3 little girls had asked him to pretend to be someone he could never replace, to this moment of celebration that honored both presence and absence. Caroline would always be missing from their family table, but they had found a way to keep her spirit alive without being trapped in grief. They had learned that remembering could be an act of joy rather than solely of pain. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Mark sat on the porch swing Caroline had loved. He could almost feel her beside him, could almost hear her laugh at the day's events. They're amazing, aren't they? He whispered to the night air. You would be so proud of them. He paused. I hope you're proud of me too. A warm breeze rustled the leaves of the maple tree they had planted together when they first bought the house. In that moment, Mark felt a certainty that transcended logic or reason, a bone-deep knowing that Caroline had somehow witnessed their journey. The Thompson family would continue to face challenges. The triplets would grow and change, developing their own relationships with their mother's memory. Mark would navigate the complexities of raising daughters through adolescence and beyond. There would be days when the absence felt unbearable. But they had discovered the most important lesson, that love persists beyond physical presence, that family can be redefined without being diminished, and that sometimes the greatest acts of parenting come from listening to the wisdom of children. The triplets' innocent request, "Pretend you're our mom," had been the catalyst for healing none of them could have anticipated. In asking their father to temporarily step into their mother's role, they had given him permission to incorporate her best qualities into his own parenting. They had shown him that honoring Caroline's memory didn't mean trying to replace her, but rather carrying forward the love she had given them all. As Mark finally headed to bed, he passed the girls' room and peeked inside. 3 identical faces peaceful in sleep, 3 hearts beating with the same resilience that had carried them through their darkest days. "Thank you," he whispered, to his daughters, to Caroline, to whatever force in the universe had given him this family that continued to teach him about love even through unimaginable loss. And somewhere, perhaps only in his heart but real nonetheless, he felt Caroline's response: "Thank you for keeping your promise to never let them forget how much they are loved." If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary resilience of families facing life's greatest challenges. Remember that sometimes our deepest healing comes from the most unexpected sources, even from the innocent wisdom of children who see possibilities where adults see only loss.